So this is really exciting. This is really wonderful. We have people who've logged in from Vizag, Pune, Mumbai, Delhi, Doha, Palakkad, Canada, Kabul, Goa, Chennai. This is so exciting. This is really wonderful. So we'd like to welcome all of you to our fourth edition of the In Conversation series, which is hosted by us as Parenting Matters. And we've been working with parents since 2004. And this is an offering that, we wanted to give out to parents as a kind of a support. And it's on various different topics, which could be relevant to parents and adults. And today we have with us Aditi Ghanekar. And I really have to read out her credentials. But Aditi, firstly, thank you so much for joining us here today. I know we've really worked hard to make this happen, and from your side too.
Yeah, thank you, Mrinalini, for this.
Yeah, it's really nice.
It's a
But I'm
great
going to
opportunity. Yeah.
have to read out this of, I'm so sorry. So Aditi has completed her master's in social work from the University of Bombay. And for 18 years, she's been working with children and parents and families on addiction. And she's also a global master trainer for the United Nations Office on Drug, Crime, and the Drug Advisory Program. So we also wanted to give a quick reminder to everyone that your mics will be on mute, but we'd love to hear your voice through the chats. There may be questions that are coming up for you that may be alive and you're curious about. Just put them up in chat. We have an incredible backup team which will collate our questions and put it forward to Aditi. So Aditi, I'd just like you to take the floor because there's so much that you'll need to talk about and cover.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mrinalini. And it's a pleasure to be here. And with all these mindful people who are going to be my audience, good evening to all of you. And I think can I share the slides? So just give me a minute. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, good evening again to everybody over here. You must be wondering how stress and trauma has something to do. How is it related to children? And that's exactly what we are going to see in the future slides that we are going to see here. So anything that is threatening, dangerous, violent, which cause overwhelming distress in children, it could be physical or psychological. That experience could be very traumatizing for a child. In short, actually, it could be the child is not able to cope up with emotionally or physically to some experience that he has had in his surrounding. So when we talk about that this is stress or trauma, let us see some day-to-day stress factors or traumatic events the child might go through. Let's take for example, the pandemic like COVID, simple things like child cannot go out of the house. He's not able to meet his friends, hang around with his friends, can itself be extremely stressful for the child. Serious illnesses, assault, accidents, natural disasters, maltreatment by caregivers or parents, death or separation of a loved one, parental fights in the house or domestic violence, school violence, bullying, cyberbullying, sudden change of school, academic failure, or even loss of friends or support system. And I'm telling you, you can go on adding to this list. This is just something that came up to my mind and I've listed it down. Anything can form stress to the child. And when the stress is for a long period of time, it just goes on and on and on. That can, inculcate into a trauma. So let us look at some of the, how do we know that the child we live with or the children we are around with have undergone a stress, to what level, or has it, gone into a traumatized thing. Let's find out some of the signs. Uh, let's look at the early childhood. Children from early childhood, they have a fear of being separated from their parents. They regress back to bed waking or baby talk. They have nightmares. They recreate. Sometimes they are playing with a doll and they recreate that trauma through play. They are not developing. Their developmental stage has stopped at a particular stage. There are a lot of changes in their normal routine behaviors that they normally have. Some of the young children cry or scream for nothing. That's the way they're coping with it, or they usually feel helpless or uncertain. Let us look at children who you might have children who are school going, and let us look at some become very anxious and fearful. They worry about their own safety or others' safety. They always feel that this trauma is going to happen all over again. They have hard time concentrating. They experience numbness, sometimes emotionally or physically. They have difficulty in sleeping. They often have a lot of guilt or shame. They keep telling others about the traumatic event again and again. They become often very clingy with their teachers or parents. And obviously, when a child is going through these things, he's going to show a little low performance in school, and that can be seen in a school going child. And how about adolescents, which are the wonderful lot? They also feel depressed and lonely. They discuss traumatic events in details with their friends. Some of them do develop eating disorders, like they excessively eat food and become little obese, or they just stop eating and they lose a lot of weight. So self-harming behaviors, some of the adolescents can cut themselves on their own body parts. They start abusing alcohol or drugs because they feel that using that can reduce the stress levels. Some of them become sexually active. They feel different from everyone else. They take too many risks. They have sleep disturbances, and they do not want to go to places that might remind them of this trauma. And they show changes in their behavior. Now, you must be all thinking that these are some of the things which we see in our normal children also. Some of these signs and symptoms are seen in normal adolescent who grows up, or normal children who are in school at a milder level. So I want to warn you that not all children who show these issues are traumatized or are having stress. Basically, if this signs and symptoms go to extremes and they long last for a very long period of time, and in spite of interventions, it doesn't seem to have come down, then maybe there is an alarm which bell should ring in your mind that these children could be traumatized and we need to do something about it. Now, having said that, and having known all the signs in children, what trauma or excessive stress can cause, we should also know how children basically respond to trauma. So let us look at this circle. Basically, the child or the family, we basically live in this circle of influence. There is we have a family who influences us, the community in a larger extent, the community and the society which has a lot of influence on us, and the culture finally, which we follow or which we live in. So same happens with your children. The children are influenced also by the same circles of influences. And these influences not only shape your behavior, but they also shape your attitudes. They shape the way you respond to things, and they shape in a number of ways your perceptions. Now, the children who have these influences, will react to any situations or experiences they have the way these influencing circles react to that particular experience. So for example, children who are stressed out or children who are traumatized, okay, will have the same experiences or will feel the same experiences as the family responds to that experience, as their caregiver responds to the same experience. For any stressful experience, the level of risk or the level of resilience or recovery, as we call it, directly depends on how the circles of influence reacts to it. So the child himself does not react to the trauma or stress immediately. It's the way the family, community, or your circle of influence reacts to it. To give a simple example, let's take an example of a child who scores less marks in school in a particular subject, which is very, very common. Now, the level of trauma caused or the recovery from that less marks will depend on how his parents and teachers react to it, basically. If they react in a supportive manner, then the child's recovery is much faster. However, if the teachers and parents react in a humiliating way, in an intimidating manner, in a very judgmental manner, then the child may show stress and a trauma, which can cause symptoms like anxiety, fear, shame, or even depression for that matter. So that's how we talk about the circles of influence. Now, when so much of stress or related to trauma, when the trauma happens to a child, the child's brain definitely gets affected in it. And I'm going to get into another slide just to show you how a child's brain gets affected. Now, let's look at the picture which is in the center. Now, normally the child's brain develops from bottom to the top, in simple words. The bottom region is responsible for your involuntary actions like your temperature, blood pressure, and basic survival needs. The midbrain is responsible for your basic survival needs. Whereas the top portion is responsible, the limbic system or the cortex is responsible for your emotions and your complex situations or complex functioning, I would call it, or the cognitive thinking, complex functioning, like the child learns decision making, problem solving skills, he learns, he gets a judgment, all this happens, or he learns abstract thinking. Normally by the age he develops 20-21 years of age, and the prefrontal cortex is developed during that age. Now the brain growth basically in the prefrontal cortex is shaped by all the, or guided by, I would say, by new experiences the children undergo. In school, they learn a lot of things in school, they learn a lot of skills, they form new friendships, they have new friends altogether, they play sports, they pursue hobbies, and they also, even the travel that they do with their parents gives them a kind of, new connections in their brain. And that is how the brain develops when the child is growing up. Now imagine a child who has undergone a trauma. This is in a normal child who has not undergone a trauma or stress. I'm talking about a normal brain development. However, in a child who has undergone trauma and stress, you can see in the next picture, the midbrain is overactive or overgrown, I would say, in size. And the rest of the parts of the brain are still stunted or not grown at all. The child in the midbrain, as I told you earlier, the child is constantly in the state of fear or hypervigilant. Is somebody going to humiliate me? Is somebody going to beat me up? Is somebody going to shout at me? He's very scared. And that is why the brain is not able to form new connections or new experiences in spite of being exposed in school to these exposures. It compromises on his emotional and cognitive functioning, basically. And that is why we see only the midbrain being very, very overactive and overgrown, because it's just for survival. They just live for survival for today. Now, having talked about this, when there's a long drawn stress on the child with something that we talked about earlier, those experiences, and a trauma to the child is definitely not only the brain is going to be compromised, it's also the overall development and growth of the child, which can be compromised. So the child can have delayed language development. He can have delayed social emotional development. He's not able to form very healthy relationships with his peers. Doesn't have any healthy relationship with his parents, for the only reason being that he doesn't trust anybody anymore. He always feels that somebody is going to attack me or ridicule me. And that can develop into an anxiety or depression. He has a very negative self-perception. I'm not being loved, or has a very low self-esteem about himself. That can show up as a coping mechanism into, they become very aggressive when approached. And some of them, can get into psychoactive substances like alcohol or drugs, which they believe that which can can reduce their stress levels, smoking for that matter, or tobacco. And they start doing that at a very early age. And now when they start doing this, I just want to, insist one point here is when they start using the substances during very, very early childhood, these substances actually act with the brain mechanism or the brain functioning. Already the child's brain growth is compromised because of the trauma, and now this adds to it. And so the child has a very, very compromised brain functioning or overall development. Some of them, of course, start excessively eating or absolutely fasting and become very thin. So these are also, again, some of the long-term effects. Now, I don't want to dishearten you by saying that this is all it is, and then, that's the end of it. No, every cloud, as we say, has a silver lining. Let me tell you, the child's brain is absolutely neuroplastic, as they call it. You can reshape the brain by giving him a very, very conducive, compassionate environment to, overall reshape his experiences, which are very positive. And you can reshape the brain over a period of time. So as adults in the child's life, as caregivers, as families, what can we do? Simple things that we can do is, first thing is immediately respond with empathy. You can reduce any form of exposure or trauma stressors that you know of, which are ongoing exposures. You can reduce that or stop that. Re-establish normal roles and routines, which is extremely, extremely important in any child's life. Let me tell you, all children love routines. They like to know when their bedtime is. They like to know when their eating time is. They like to know, when are they going to have a playtime, or when are they going to have a time to play with their pets. So re-establishing these norms and routines back into the child's life, which we can do. And of course, you need to activate a lot of positive support networks among your family and your significant others who, who are actually interested in you. More so, that trust which is gone because of the trauma which the child has undergone, and maybe the reaction that you gave to the child, you have to build back that trust. So children who have experienced trauma may feel ashamed, unloved, fearful, threatened, depressed, or anxious. Now, these vulnerabilities can be repaired through positive experiences and supportive networks. You can actually change that brain that we saw, which was, fat in the center. It can go back to the normalcy with all these supportive networks. First thing is, do not blame the children for any form of stress or trauma they have experienced, or do not pressurize the child to talk for details that they do not want to share. Also, don't make false commitments or promises that you may not be able to keep up to. Have quality interactions with children. This means that fully engaging with your child and listening to the child. Involve the child in simple decision makings which impact his or her life. The child feels inclusive, the child feels wanted in your house, and that is very important for the child to belong to this family or to belong to this group. Focus on the child's strengths and resilience rather than what he doesn't have, and see the child's behaviors as coping responses rather than bad. Every child, they may be screaming at the loudest voice, they may be crying, they may be trying to tell lies at times, but children do not know how to respond when they are stressed out. So do not call these behaviors as bad, but then they're just coping mechanisms, and all they want is your empathy and compassion, basically. And seek professional help if needed. Now, every child is different kind of a flower, and all together make this a very beautiful garden. And thank you so much.
Oh, Aditi, that was just really beautiful. Thank you.
So
very closely connected. Aditi, I was just curious about one thing. Yeah. When you talk about one of the questions we got is you did explain how prolonged stress can lead to trauma.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of the situations you mentioned in growing children, like, whether it's school or marks, that can be an ongoing thing, and maybe some of them would respond differently to it.
Yeah. So it also depends on what supportive networks the child has. And even if the child goes through the same, so all children do not respond to trauma in the similar manner, first of all. So every child responds differently, and that becomes, kind of a stress factor. That makes the parents feel, oh, that child is quite okay with it, so why are you responding that way? So do not, every child is an independent identity and has his own strengths and weaknesses or coping skills. And so if there is a supportive parental background where the child lives in and supports the child for his failures of any kind of stress that he's undergoing, the child will respond to it in a different or a very positive manner. He would recover out of it very soon. Whereas if you blame the child for what he has done, or if you humiliate the child, if you tell the child to keep quiet and not talk about it, kind of silence the child is going to keep that in him, and he's going to find that I can't trust anybody, and he's going to respond it in a different manner, by maybe by using substances, or doing all kinds of other things which we call it as unsocial, but these are just coping mechanisms of a child.
Right. So because it's very interesting, very often in our workshops, we do get a lot of questions about an oversensitive child.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you've said that every
Absolutely.
child is different and unique, and they all
Absolutely.
feel the government. So what would you have to say about something like that to parents who might be concerned that their children tend to maybe respond to something a little more actively than another child?
Yeah.
Is it
So
something that they would outgrow eventually, or is it a beautiful thing? How
no,
could
so
they
if you
support
think
that?
your child is overreacting to something, I think the parents need to sit with the child, talk it out to him about why is that response, because the child may be knowing only that kind of a response. He has not learned any other form of coping mechanism or response. And so don't blame the child, don't label him as bad, or this is not accepted in our society or community. How can you throw a kind of a tantrum, they say, I don't like that word, but then people do abuse that, as so. Don't say that that's the way the child responds, which means that he may be undergoing a kind of a stress, and you just have to address it as parents. Just it's absolutely okay to have that kind of a stress. Even I have seen two siblings in the same house responding in a different manner to the same stressful situations, and you need to look at them independently and
Okay. So
not
what you're saying, so I'm sorry.
generalize. Yeah. And not
So when you're
generalize.
saying,
Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
right, so when you're talking about these coping mechanisms, what's very clear is that, children very often don't have a vocabulary to actually
Absolutely.
say
Absolutely. Not everybody
it,
has a vocabulary.
that
Not
I
only
am
that,
struggling with this.
they also can't tell you how they are feeling. Many children cannot identify the feelings. So if they are feeling depressed, or if they are feeling anxious, or if they are feeling stressed out, they don't know how to, respond to this. And so they have their own way to respond. So just because you find it that it doesn't suit in your own culture, or your society doesn't accept it, or you never had somebody like that reacting in your own family, doesn't mean the child is bad, or you just veto the child, saying that he's just overdoing it or overreacting it.
So what you're saying is that when we find children using these coping strategies, like what you mentioned for specific age groups, it would be a good idea for a parent to have the ear to the ground and find out what could be happening in the child's
Absolutely.
life in school and
Absolutely.
be curious about it.
Absolutely.
So Aditi had a question of, is substance abuse disorder limited only to drugs and alcohol? Like when you spoke about eventually stress could lead to substance abuse as well.
Yeah. So substance use disorder is related to psychoactive drugs which you consume. Whereas I would like to extend to that it's not only the substance use disorder, because I mentioned that, it's also behavioral addictions that children can get into, like your internet addiction or social media addiction or gaming, which is a very, very common addiction, which now we see because of the COVID situation. Children are at home, they have nothing to go out to, they have nothing to play with, and they all have laptops or a smartphone, because they have to do their homework, or they are, I think, schooling on that particular mobile. And that is when they get into, and children are very smart, they get into the gaming very soon, or internet addiction, surfing very soon. And that's what happens. Like the same symptoms that you see when you consume a substance, the same symptoms you see when we call it as internet addiction or behavioral addiction. They spend more number of hours on the internet. They get angry if they are disturbed by anybody. They stop doing their regular activities, like they are not hungry anymore, they don't come on time for lunch, and they are not interested in any of their favorite hobbies or any sports if they were playing. So the similar kind of symptoms you see when children get hooked onto the gaming or internet addiction.
Okay, so what would you actually tell parents when they come in and they notice that their children may be using some of these coping strategies? What would it look like in terms of really, like elaborating it in different age groups of how the parent or the community, or you talked about the influence, the circle of influence. How would you expand that empathy and that support in terms of, and today, both the parents are working, there's limited time with the children,
Right.
the lifestyle is a little crunched in.
Right. So first is I would start with the parents or the caregivers who are right with the child, spending quality time with your child. You may be working mother, but then you still have little time at home, and definitely it's like giving the child your time is not sitting and cooking in the kitchen and then the child is telling you something. It's actually sitting with the child, looking into his eyes and listening to him without your mobile on or without your TV on or without your newspaper with you. So giving that half an hour, which is quality time with the child, helps in communicating with the child very efficiently. And that's when the child also knows that my mother or my father is there for me to say whatever I need to say. And they really listen to me. And listening actively to the child. It's not only listening to his words, but also looking at his nonverbal way, because children are very expressive. And many children I've seen do not know how to express by words, but they express with their face. You can see the gestures they make, and you can actually make out what the child is feeling. They don't know the feelings, they can't label the feelings, but by looking at them, you can actually know what the child is telling you. So that giving that quality time is the first thing that you need to do. Secondly, if you have like, as I talked about, the influence circle of influences, and which are quite influential in our society, which we look at. The family might say, oh, your child this, and oh, your child that. I think you need to be very positive with the child and not let your child be humiliated by others. When you know that the child, you have to be on the side of the child. Let the child know that you and the child are in the same team, and that you don't gang up with your relatives or your whatever so-called society and community that you are in. Do not, as parents, do not tell lies, or like people keep telling tall stories about their children. I don't think you need to do that. And because the children do not like it when they see the parents lying to somebody else just to get a little. So this is a warning to the parents that be normal, be truthful. uh, your child is special. He has some special qualities which the other children may not have. So do not compare children here. And if there is somebody, you stand in the team of the child and spread the positive vibes to them. Yeah.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Aditi, we have a question from one of the participants here today that can trauma be prenatal?
Yeah, it could be prenatal. Yes.
Yeah.
So if the woman has undergone a traumatic experience during her pregnancy time, or the woman is, I would also go on to, woman is abusing substances, the child sometimes, especially with opioid addiction, the child would be born with opioid addiction. And the child has to be actually, during the delivery, there has to be a medical personnel who understands how to handle the child when he's out, because the child shows withdrawal symptoms, and he has to be the child is screaming to the top of the voice, the little baby, which is born, and that has to be medically treated with certain medications a doctor knows about, and then you can save the child. Otherwise this can be fatal. So there is prenatal
But what if
traumas.
it is not a substance abuse, but just maybe other emotional trauma?
Violence, yes, it could be violence. The woman is undergoing a lot of emotional trauma, a lot of abuse in the family. The children born also show those symptoms. Basically, they are like, they show signs of being cranky, they cry all the time, they have little developmental delays at times, because the woman herself is not mentally all right. She's being abused, and she doesn't know how to cope up with her own emotions. And in that case, we need, yes, to treat both of them together, the woman
Okay,
as
so
well
what
as the
so
child.
what would you say to reassure this parent? Uh,
uh,
it helps to get in touch with a professional.
Yeah, I think in that
This.
case, I think the woman definitely needs some kind of a counseling to stabilize herself, get out of the abuse. If she's in an abusive relationship, or if she is under a huge stress that needs to be brought out to the counselor and find out ways how she can do it. Let me tell you, all these issues can be sorted out and have solutions if you take the help. So first thing is, don't resist any help. If you know somebody, please go ahead and take the help, professional help, because that is the only opportunity for you to come out of these situations. You can't be sitting with this situation and saying, no, it's not allowed, or I won't be able to do it. Now, many times I would say women are not so, I would say, empowered to take their own decisions, and the woman suffers with it, and so the child suffers. And then you see a lot of developmental delays, or delays in the child's development. Yes.
Sorry. There is another concern about what about a trauma caused by parents separating when the child was a baby? How would you?
Right. So it again depends. I would go back to the circle of influence. If the baby is with the mother and the mother reacts to it in a very positive manner and doesn't show much of a trauma or a stress to it, the baby doesn't have any issues about it. But if there's a lot of violence, or there's a lot of not only physical, but even verbally, there are lots of exchanges of things, and the woman is distressed. How is she going to live? She's literally thrown on the streets, or she doesn't know from where the money is going to come from. Then yes, of course, the child who's with her, or the baby who's with her, definitely would suffer that trauma.
So there was, how do we keep children, away from trauma, especially if a father refuses to meet the child who is actually very keen on meeting the father? I mean, there are different family dynamics, different things happen.
Right.
So how can a parent be active, or the parent who's present be active with something like that?
Okay, so I if I'm getting a question right, if the child wants to meet the father, but the child is with the mother, and the mother is not allowing him or her to meet that father, is that the question?
I think the question is, the father refuses to meet the child who was keen to meet him.
Okay.
Because of a separation or a divorce or something like
that. Right. So yeah, so the mother again has to play the fatherly role or father figure in the child's life. The mother is the only caregiver or the family member to that child. And yes, the child is going to go through a lot of stress and trauma because of that, because it's a separation from a loved one. And definitely, so mother has to sit with the child, give the child more time, explain to the child over a period of time, and make him understand that this is now over because of certain reasons. As long as the mother is compassionate and giving all the love and care to the child over a period of time, it's nothing comes out easily. Nothing, no child who's stressed out or traumatized is going to change overnight. So it will take its own time, and then the mother can form her own supportive group, positive supportive group, which can play a role, as a father, maybe her brother or some uncle, who can, do the fatherly role in the child's life. If they are supportive and compassionate, she can form her own support group, basically.
Okay, yeah. So Aditi,
but it does impact the child, and it does show it on the child's behavior. It shows on the child's academic performance. It does show in the child's sleep. Sometimes they're not able to sleep, and yeah, he goes through that period. But as long as the mother is supportive, okay, there is a trust in mother. Yeah,
we've just put up Aditi's contact in the chat for those of you who might want to take this further with her. Aditi, there's another question, which is that what are the long-term effects of childhood trauma, and does it really ever go away?
I believe that they go away, because as I told you, the child's brain is neuroplastic. So if you pick up the child from whatever traumatized situation he is in, and give him a lot of compassion, lot of love and care, and be truthful to the child, give him the right kind of conducive atmosphere to grow, give him healthy experiences with his peers and teachers and significant others, the child's brain slowly shapes back into the normalcy. And I've seen children from a traumatized environment coming out into a normal, over a period of time again, having got this kind of a conducive atmosphere, fared really well in their life, successfully gone ahead with life, and having very good relationships in life. So you can make a difference, but one has to really give in that conducive atmosphere and give that kind of attention to the child. and
Okay,
see
so
that he's not re-traumatized again. Because the only fear factor that the child has it, am I going to get re-traumatized? Am I going to get thrown out of the house again? Is this, they don't trust the mother because they think if the father has left, the mother might leave again. The mother might leave me and go, and then I'm going to be alone. So the last thing I would tell parents is to, develop a fight in front of the children, because you will patch up later on, but the child remembers that fight. And also not talking about leaving the house and going away in front of the child, even if it is in your anger. Don't say that in front of the child, because the child is traumatized because of that. If my father leaves, what will happen? If my mother leaves, what has happened? And I have dealt with cases which have like that, and I had to actually counsel the family members or the parents about not talking such issues in front of the child.
okay, so what I also get from this is, Aditi, because it's a lot that a parent has to handle. Sometimes single parents
Yeah,
handling the
yeah,
stress and trauma
yeah,
for the child.
yeah.
So where is the support for the parent in this? You actively work in supporting the parents for their well-being as well, because it's a lot for them
Yes.
to.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if the parent has come to a counselor, then we do that for a long period of time till she or he is, settled in their lives. And we also try to develop a supportive network, because you might have a very close friend who's very supportive towards you, or a very close family member who's supportive towards you. So we do counsel those people also, that
Okay.
what is their role, because they are interested in the child and the family and this mother or father, and what is their role as a support member, actively playing a part for the development of this child. So we do have this support.
So you would mention in one of the coping strategies, it could be eating. So we've got a question that how do we handle children's problems of maybe shopping addiction
Yes.
or eating sugar when maybe when they're teenagers and they're trying to cope with that feeling?
Yeah. So talk to them. First is talk to them about different coping strategies. Not eating sugar, that's not the only coping strategies. Then teach them about different games they can play, or yoga, or what children can do, listening to music or whatever they like. Shift their focus from that particular thing to another thing which they like. Talk about it, what they like, and then do it. Don't force your ideas on the child, because the child is never going to accept that. He might do it for 2-3 days and then just give up. So I've seen parents who tell the children, oh, go and learn guitar, and the child has just gone compulsorily for maybe a month, and after that he's given up. And then he came and told me, I never wanted to learn guitar, it was my mother's wish. So don't force your ideas. You got to sit with your children, talk it out to them, get their ideas, respect them as a independent individual entity. Normally parents think, I know best for my child. Yes, I do agree with that you do have the control of the child, but then please be in a conversation with your child and just ask him, and he'll give you a lot of ideas what he likes or doesn't like. So that could be one of the ways. And what was your second part? The sugar part and the
Shopping addiction
yeah.
among.
So shopping addiction is another thing which, see, children get into these addictions because they feel the stress level comes down, because they get a very high satiety value or satisfaction through that, or euphoria through that. So again, limit your internet time with your child. I know today's children are internet born, they are born with that, but then you need to limit your time on the internet. If you have uh, see, make sure that the child uses internet in front of you, like he's not going to sitting in a room, locking the room and then using the internet. So if it's just playing a game or something, limit the time again. And that, I would say, age wise, again, I am not going to say give 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours, depending on what age your child is. For a very young child, 1 or 2 hours will be more than enough, but for a adolescent child who does a lot of homework or projects on the internet, he might require a little more time. I have also had cases, just to add on to this, where children use internet or play games on internet just to get away from their regular schedules of work. And they say that this is my only, and especially in the COVID times, that we are all locked down in the houses and children are like stuck up in one room. They say, where do I go and play? So this is the time I play. But then, okay, if they are playing for 1 hour, 1.5 hours, stick to that. Rest of the time they see that the internet is used for their homework or whatever the school purpose or project purpose is. Thirdly, don't, I have also had cases where parents have bought uh, high network internets and, the latest phones, which can take in all the, everything on the phone itself. So depending again on the age of the child, don't give in too much, because it is a kind of an addiction. Gaming addiction is now considered as, is diagnosed as a behavioral addiction along with gambling. So, and children are getting more and more into it. And so there's nothing wrong in playing a game, but then limit the time of the game or internet use. That's all I would say.
Okay, so the parent, actively seeing what is required at that point of time, and, kind of setting those limits with empathy. And I also like that point where you brought up, Aditi, because it's very easy for us to swoop down and take control and say, I think that this is good. But when you're saying about having conversations, whether it's about that guitar, to actually find out, is this something that's going to be helping my child?
Exactly.
Okay. So
also, I would like to just add on to what you said. When children get onto these internet addictions or even substance use addictions, the parents need to figure out, are they exposing the child to enough hobbies or enough other interests in life? Initially the child is not interested, because you need to sit with the child. If you want the child to develop a reading habit, you need to sit with a book with a very young child and read the book to him. He copies you, so you become kind of a role model sometimes to the child. But I have seen parents who sit with their own mobile phones throughout the day during the lunchtime, and then you're telling the children not to use it. So there is a kind of a contradiction the child has in the mind. Why am I not allowed to do this when my parent is doing it? So watch out to what you are doing it. Maybe you're doing it for your own work thing, but then when you have children in the house, I think we have to be a little bit more mindful about this.
So we have another one in continuation with the trauma, which is caused by the parent separation. The mother is remarried and the child has a good relationship with the mother's new partner, and the child doesn't show any interest in wanting to meet the biological father. So there is a wonder that, or a concern that, could this be a suppressed stress, this denial to meet? Could it be a sense of and what could be done about this?
So I think the child needs to be asked, not by the mother, but by a neutral person or a counselor rather, does he really want to meet the biological father? And if yes, why? And if no, why? Basically. And if the child has started liking the new partner of the mother, then maybe that is his new father. So maybe the mother has, we also need to study the dynamics that happened during the separation, whether the mother has said a lot of things about the father negatively and the child has heard it, which maybe the mother's perception about the father may not be true for all you know, but I totally respect the mother for saying that. But we need to figure out what happened. What is it that she was talking to the child when she was getting separated? So what has gone into the child's mind about this father for not meeting him again? So we need to figure out and find out what happened. Sometimes children hear what parents say to each other, and that gets fixed in the mind permanently, and they start looking at the father or the mother figure in those contexts or perceptions, because now the child has a mother who's taking care of the child knows that this is where I have to be, and maybe what the mother says may be true.
Okay, so getting a neutral person where the child can be open and doesn't feel the need to protect the mother or the father's feelings.
Yes.
There's another question here, Aditi, on how does one deal with early childhood abandonment trauma? Does it, eventually keep interfering with adult life? And what kind of therapy would you recommend for that?
Yeah, it's a very valid question and very true to itself. Early abandonment, the child is securely attached, and now the attachment is no more there, can go into a very disorganized attachment where the child can develop a lot of, he will never trust anybody in his life. There are children who grew up as adults and never could have very trusting relationships with their partners, and hence never got married successfully, could never trust any friends, and hence could never develop close friends. And that's why they feel very lonely and rejected. And so what can be done about this is, again, speaking to the child, telling him that everybody is not like this, developing that trust, taking a great effort. So we need to counsel the mother or whoever the child is living with, the caregiver is left with after abandonment, that there are people who care and who really are concerned about you. And it has to be known. It doesn't have to be told to the child is not going to believe you. And over a period of time, like I would say cases of adopted children, who are being abandoned and they know they are being abandoned in certain circumstances. But then I've seen children being adopted and the parents having a very subtle relationship with their children, because that compassion, that extra, you need to really put in that extra. In our normal children, our biological children, we take a lot of things for granted in a relationship. But to develop this relationship, to develop that bond, to develop that trust, the parents have to really give in their time and their, I wouldn't say over pamper the child and give him everything. And over a period of time being, however, a little bit of on the backside of the mind, he might take time to trust people. It's not that he'll never trust them if not handles, but he will take little time to trust than the other children.
Okay, this is a
in taking help, in our society, we jitter from taking help, oh, I don't want to go to a counselor, I don't want to go to a psychiatrist. So the first thing I would tell you all is there's nothing wrong. If I have cold, cough and fever, I'm going to go to a doctor. If I need some financial help, I'm going to go to a chartered accountant. It's just like that. Taking help is very necessary from somebody who's a professional in that field.
Yes, that's so true. Aditi, can trauma be imagined by the child because of what the child has heard that has happened to the friend?
Yes. Yes, so that is vicarious trauma. So we all can imagine the trauma. In fact, people are traumatized by not getting into that situation, but just by hearing it from others, what has happened to them. And that also has similar kind of signs and symptoms that we saw earlier in this slideshow that we saw, and that also needs a similar kind of a handling. So vicarious trauma is also very, very true. And people working in the field of mental health, or definitely have that kind of a vicarious trauma also. So the children can go through that. Yes. I can't hear you, Mrinalini.
Sorry. Yeah. Can trauma manifest as health conditions like a heart disease, diabetes, depression, asthma?
It does. It does. Oh. Actually, I didn't put it on my slide because it would have been too technical and too heavy for everybody, but it does. It does manifest itself in the form of diabetes, heart ailment, and things like that. It does. Asthma, lung infections and things like that.
So I'm also
your headaches or severe headaches, it can manifest, or backaches, neck pains, and all those things. Yes.
And what about, these coping strategies that you spoke about, Aditi? Each one may be prone to something. So if I'm stressed, I may be prone to eating food, or I may be prone to watching mindless TV.
Wouldn't say personality dependent. Whatever is available for the child will access that. So some children may not be accessible to TVs, so they may not access that, but they go to smoking outside. Some children spend a lot of time outside and start smoking with children because the parents may not allow them to watch TV at home. So it depends on what is accessible to them and what they find is easy to cope up with. They also learn a lot from other peers who've gone through that, and they say, okay, do this and you'll feel very peaceful. And that is the age when you actually trust the friend more than your family members, because you don't get to get ridiculed or humiliated by others. So whatever is accessible, whatever is easily done, the child does that.
So what would you think about this, the academic stress that children are going through now, and the kind of coping mechanism for this very highly competitive environment, academically or otherwise? Maybe a healthier coping mechanism to deal with this stress?
You're talking about this pandemic academic issues, or generally?
Just generally what you've come across, the high academic competition and stress.
Right.
What coping methodologies or strategies can parents guide their children towards?
Yeah, that's a very typical question, and that's why I'm smiling, because I have a couple of people who I'm already counseling with this. So the parents are very anxious, and I rightfully true. I am not denying their anxiety, because as parents, they want the child to get into the best institutions. And to get into the best institutions, you need high level marks. And so even if I get 95, my father is telling me get 98, because that was the cutoff last year. And the child is now stressed out as to how much more can I do and can I take. I am not going to guarantee it. So first thing is, believe in the child's potential and ability. Believe that that he has a routine and he has some time fun activity also throughout the day. And you may want him to go to a best institution, so does the child wants to go to the best institution. But that is not the end of life. There is much more to that. Doesn't define you. Your marks don't define you. Just because in that particular one exam the child did not fare well doesn't mean he doesn't know anything. So believe in your child's potential, and whichever college, the next college he goes to, if he is going to shine out, he's going to shine out. The more you give it to him, the autonomy to him to study. And of course, you can create a conducive atmosphere for him to study, the environment to study. But I've seen parents, keeping awake, pressurizing a child to solve hajar, those test exams, before the examination. It's so stressful for the child. And they don't allow any fun activities. In fact, when they go to 10th or 12th standard, I've seen children not playing anymore, not doing their hobbies anymore. So remember that only academic performance in college might give him an admission to a higher level college, but he may not be his growth is not overall development. So believe in your child's potential, believe that he can do well, believe that he'll get an admission in the best colleges. In spite of that, working hard. If he doesn't, that's not the end of the world. So don't feel bad about it. If somebody else's child has got it, good for them. Don't even say anything to them. I mean, it's nice that he got it, but that doesn't make your child any lesser worth. So take away those, there are a lot of pressures from the peers. I can understand from where the parents react to this. It's too much of you go to school and all the parents are talking about it. And then it pressurizes you as to, am I doing the right thing? I'm not pressurizing my child. I should do this. Do not do this. Go by what your instincts say. Your child has a potential and he will survive very beautifully or do well in his life if he really copes up with that potential, and trust the child. That's all I can say.
That's really a potent suggestion. Aditi, we have a different one where the child is a bit of I think the parent says is an adult and undertakes OCD type of behavior, such as excessive washing of hands.
Yeah.
And they prefer to stay alone and interact very less and don't want to do any activity or work. So I do know you've said that all this takes time and, we slowly have to speak to them, but what would be a step-by-step thing for a parent like this where the child is wanting to be alone as well?
Yeah, so now by default, no child wants to be alone, but giving him his space. Definitely we need our own spaces. So the child needs his own space also. But what I'm hearing is not that kind of a space she's talking about. He wants to be alone all the time, not to be disturbed all the time, not wanting to go out. So these are some of the signs of depression. And OCD also is because of the stress probably he's gone through, he's developed it, or he has an OCD personality, which needs to be figured out. So I would tell this parent who's talking about this, please seek professional help for this. And, let the counselor or the psychiatrist say that there's nothing wrong and you need to do these things. Because obsessive compulsive behaviors are formed with excessive stress, or they are personalities on their own. So it could be either way. So we need to figure it out what it is. And definitely the other one is signs of depression. No child wants to be completely alone. They like to interact. They like to communicate. Now, one thing I want to also tell the parents that you develop the communication habit from childhood. Don't expect a child at the adolescent times to start communicating everything to you. If you haven't developed that habit from the baby, and keep talking to the child when you're KG. If your daughter's in KG standard and she comes home, ask her what happened in the school, who was the teacher, which friend do you like. the child starts responding, and then they develop into this communication habit with the parents. They tell you each and everything, and then as you grow up, the child continues that. But there are some parents who don't give, here as per se, during the small, when they are small children, because maybe there are grandparents in the house and things like that. And suddenly when the child becomes adolescent, they expect the child to start communicating with them and telling them everything. It's not going to happen. The child has never done that in his life, to tell you everything that happened in his life. So he is learned to cope up on his own, and that's why they don't communicate so easily.
So in case, because of some situation that, there was a bit of a loss of connection during the early years, would you say that with the intervention or a therapist or a
always make
neutral
up.
person,
Yeah.
you can work at it
Yes.
slowly?
Yes.
And okay.
Yes.
There is also a trying situation here where the mother has cancer and the father now is in charge of 11-year-old.
Okay.
So what suggestion would you have for the father to deal with the trauma?
Yeah. So the father has to deal with the trauma and accept the situation, which is really sad. And, we know the consequences of the situation. And then you trust the child, that the child is going to understand. He wants to know what happened to the mother and, how long. So give him all the positive, tell the child to remember all the positive memories of the mother, and then talk to the child about what is cancer in a very simple way, not very medically, but in a very simple way, and that it can happen to many people. Let the child know that this is not only happening to my mother, it happens to many people, and it has no reason why it happens. So it is not that my mother is bad or my mother has done something and that's why she's suffering, but it's just an illness which happened to somebody, and unfortunately it has happened to my mother. And now that whatever little time I have with my mother, I'm going to spend it in a very positive way. I'm going to have good memories of my mother. So one can, again, a little bit of counseling to the father, and first of all, getting out of that trauma which he's suffering from, which is really, really hard. And then to, trust the child, give the child everything, give full attention to the child when you talk to him about it, and make him understand that even if the mother is not going to be there, after some time we are all going to be together always. So not making it a too depressing thing for the child, but then to make him accept that, talking to him about death. Now many parents hesitate to talk about death, and especially when the grandparents die, or some death happens in the family, they hide away the children from even seeing the dead body. So which may not be fruitful in a long run, because the child still wonders, where did this person go or what happened to it. So it's always better that you open the topic of death and say that everybody dies and things like that, systematically talk to them. Some of them die early because of illnesses, accidents, or things like that, and let the child accept, as we accept birth, we accept death, and the child accepts that, basically, if you sit with the child and really give that time. So maybe he'll have to work on that, but first let him get out of that trauma which he's facing and the depression which he's facing.
Right. Aditi, we put up your contact again for people who might want to take it further with you, but I just had one last question before we wrap this up. And you've given us so much of information and insights into dealing with stress and trauma. And we're kind of alive in this position of the pandemic, and there are so many insecurities about whether it's work, whether it is, children isolated from their friends. So everybody in the family is going through that stress. So what would be your nugget of wisdom for this?
Okay, so take it as it comes, because none of us know when it's going to end. None of us know when the vaccine is going to be available for us and whether it's going to be actually useful. So take your precautions, do your precautions, don't take it lightly at any given point of time, even if wherever you're living, everything is open. Wear your mask and go out, I would say. Wash your hands, sanitize everything, and take precautions for yourself to not get infected by this COVID. And as much as possible, I know everybody can't go out and go for a walk or things like that. You can find different constructive ways of making yourself busy, or different kinds of recreational games that you can play with. Look at family togetherness as a bonding, which never happened before that. Everybody was out, and now you can fix up a routine for playing cards or playing some Scrabble or different kinds of games that as a family to play with. Develop those bonding with your children. Many of your family members may react. This is for everybody. The children may react in a different way, sometimes being frustrated with something. Or the mothers can react in a different manner because all the work they have to do. Don't take it, don't be judgmental, don't humiliate or intimidate, don't start screaming because somebody is, the rest of the family members gang up together and bring that family member back to normalcy. And we all are together, and only when you are together you can do something, become more creative at home, which you've never been. And there are so many things you can do sitting in the house actually. So do the bonding, because I have seen many people sit in the house and doing, but all in their own rooms, independently. So that's not what I'm talking about. You bond together and figure out what creative games you can play, and have fun, listen to music, dance around, watch all the Netflix movies, do magic, learn something, learn a new skill like drawing and painting or art and things like that. There is so much you always wanted to do. Make a list of things that you always wanted to do when the office will close down. Now this is a time you can do it, and I'm sure it's going to end. I'm not telling you this is going to become permanent in our lives, but yeah, it's right now we don't have the answer when it's going to end. So take care and be safe.
Aditi, thank you so much. This has been really incredible. I think just basically there's this big takeaway about the way you've told us the kind of circle of influence that we can be towards, for our children, for the community around. That stress is going to be there in, it can be as small as going to school, or it could be as big as a loss of somebody close to us. And what is our support to ourselves and the people going through it? We've put your details again in the chat, and it'll be really great for anyone who wants to reach out to Aditi. Please contact her and take your journey forward. And we also wanted to say we've put a link of the parenting punishment booklet, so feel free to log into that. And we have Aditi very nicely said about the way we respond to our children, and that also stresses them out. So Parenting Matters is coming up with a anger management workshop that's called Befriend Your Anger, this on the 1st of November between 4:30 and 6. So sign up. That's Indian Standard Time, since we have people from all over right now. And it'll be great to see you again. Aditi, thank you for everything, for just being, supporting us, and when you support us, we're able to support ourselves and our children.
Thank you so much, Prerna and Parenting Matters. And I would just like to say to the audience that if you still have questions which are not answered, or if you think about it later, write to me, or my email is written there. You can write to me directly, and I'm definitely sure I'll answer you. So, don't feel that I didn't answer your questions. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
The entire team of Parenting Matters, and I keep telling everybody about it, that you have to be a member of that and follow them. So thank you so much, Prerna.
That's really wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for your questions. Thank you for joining us. And do keep a track. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook. Check out our website. We have another In Conversation series coming up next month, and we'd love to see you there again. Good night.
Good night.